Hey YouTube, my name's Ryan from the newly renamed Appalachian Observatory channel, and today I wanted to fill you in on rogue geoengineering startups and what they're up to in their own words. Whether it's dumping iron into the ocean to create algae blooms that capture carbon, or covering the Arctic ice with silica beads which reflect sunlight, or sending sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere to reflect sunlight and mimic volcanic effects. Every so often, a rogue geoengineering company comes onto the field. This company here makes Sunsets, which has been in the news the last few weeks. Launched some balloons last year, which were full of sulfur dioxide gas, and they're trying to mimic volcanic cooling. The sulfur dioxide gas goes into the stratosphere, where it combines with water molecules and creates these sulfur globules which reflect light back into space. This happened during the 1991 Pinatubo eruption, which released a ton of sulfur dioxide and decreased the temperature of the world by 1 degree. A few years earlier, in the Mount Chinchon eruption, decreased the temperature of the planet by 0.5 degrees. And you can go all the way back to the 1815 volcanic eruption, Mount Tambora, which actually caused a year without a summer and widespread crop failure and famine throughout the world at that time. So this company is trying to use the same technology. They say they've raised $750,000 and are trying to sell cooling credits, they say, for $10 a piece. Each cooling credit is equivalent to a certain amount of sulfur dioxide released into the atmosphere. They say that their plan is to sell these credits to big companies like Coca-Cola to help them meet their 2030, 2050 carbon goal objectives. There's actually a lot of debate in the carbon credit world because these cooling credits are different from carbon credits, and since it mimics a volcano, the sulfur goes back down to the ground after a couple of years. So they say it just holds off global warming for a little bit. It doesn't fix the problem like they claim to with the carbon credits. So those guys are actually arguing with the Make Sunset crowd at the current time. They say that each balloon can cancel out 10 tons of carbon dioxide. And for a mere $30 million, they say they can cancel out the effects of global warming for a whole year. Sounds pretty impressive. Less impressed by that would be certain nonprofit groups, indigenous rights groups, and the country of Mexico, which just learned about them geoengineering on their sovereign soil and said that Make Sunsets did not apply for any permits to do their experiments, and Mexico states that they have a zero geoengineering policy. So at the current time, Make Sunsets is banned from doing any more launches. So you can still go onto their website and get a $10 cooling credit, but they aren't allowed to launch any balloons at the current time. Their CEO here, Luke Iseman, is this gentleman from San Francisco. He previously worked in ag tech and soil sensing. I actually just did a video on that recently. You can check it out. I highly recommend. He also worked in shipping container tiny homes in San Francisco because that's the only way you can afford rent in San Francisco. And he has some interesting quotes here. He says, "We joke/not joke that this is partly a company and partly a cult. Making me look like the Bond villain is going to be helpful to certain groups. If someone, somewhere in the world, wants to launch a balloon with us, I hope they reach out. And if they are a government, I will bend over backward to be on the next plane to visit them." There are several island states whose existence is threatened by rising sea levels. I don't need permission from everyone in the world to do this. Hey, maybe responsible academics working for the public good actually need funding, or else crazy people are going to do this on their own. So you can kind of see his their company worldview from some of that, and I listened to some of their long form interviews, and it is on par for sure. He has a blog post from the other day lamenting about the ban from Mexico. And at the very end, he says that they are donating $2,500 to the Inter American Institute of Global Change Research in Paraguay. So might be shopping for new homes there. He says he says in the future they want to make their balloons reusable and have a bunch more sensors and stuff on it. It sounded like that technology behind that is a bit off, but it sounded like he kind of wanted to copy the SpaceX model of like the reusable rockets, you know. So he wants to have these balloons that he can shoot up and then reuse and shoot up and then reuse and get like way more volume. $30 million to stop global warming for 1 year. Make Sunsets might be a rogue actor, but they're not alone. 10 years ago, there was a group led by Russ George, who was a former Greenpeace guy from San Francisco. He purchased a boat and filled it full of iron dust and took it out into the Pacific Ocean, dumped all the iron dust out there, went back to shore, filled it up again, went back out into the ocean, dumped it again, kept going back and forth until he covered this huge area, which created an algae bloom that he was supposing would eat the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and then die and go to the bottom of the ocean. He got into a little bit of trouble for operating on indigenous land and canceled. Another group here, the Arctic Ice Project, is another group that, you guessed it, is from San Francisco. And their plan is to dump millions of synthetic silica microbeads onto an area of the Alaskan Arctic about the size of Belgium. This one is currently ongoing and not very popular with the native Alaskans up there. The Alaskan natives actually purchased tickets to a fundraiser recently in the San Francisco Bay Area. And when the Arctic Ice Project found out that natives were coming to protest their fundraiser, they canceled those tickets and refunded them and said, no, you're not allowed here. You're banned. Go away. So this one is ongoing right now. Another one, Bill Gates, everyone's favorite doctor, partnered with MIT to work on stratospheric aerosol injections, kind of similar to Make Sunsets, over in Sweden. The Swedes actually terminated their agreement and banned Bill Gates from doing his experiment there in Sweden. And this was mostly due to protests from a indigenous Sami council. I hope I'm saying that right. The Sami people are a group of indigenous in Sweden, Norway, Finland, and Russia. They strongly opposed Bill Gates' project there and said it goes against our worldview that we should respect nature. Wise words right there. And then lastly, but probably most importantly, in 2022, the Congress passed a $1.5 trillion omnibus bill, those big bills that you see that no one actually reads, and they just put a whole bunch of random stuff in there. And in that $1.5 trillion omnibus bill, they instructed the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy to implement a 5-year-long solar geoengineering research plan. So that is just public record. So Biden's team somewhere, some interns or research scientists are working on this same technology in the White House. In all these examples, I'm very struck by how the indigenous people, and this is probably mostly because a lot of these experiments are conducted near the polar ice caps or around the equatorial belt, but the indigenous people are always the ones who are like, this is a bad idea, stop what you're doing, or go do it in your own country, stay away from our land, you know? I would say these people have the closest connection on Earth to the spirit of the planet. And they probably understand some of these multivariable problems in a way that other people in more specialized fields have trouble understanding. Everything is connected. In these situations, I always think of the Jeff Goldblum line from Jurassic Park. Your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should. And he said that right before the T Rexes got loose and started eating everyone. All right, guys, I'll see you next time. Like and subscribe. Appreciate it. Bye bye.